All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Watch Me Edit episode 2. And this is going to be rather experimental. I did one of these a long time ago and it wasn't live. And I haven't gone live in a while and I've updated a lot of my software. And so I realized about 15 minutes before going live that it was compatible. And I had to quickly reconnect everything and make it start working. So I'm going to wait for a few minutes for some of you to get on. I usually can't tell if anybody's watching the way I'm doing this. I have a lot of stats up on my screen, but I don't think anything is actually working properly on here when it comes to the stats. So it shows that there's 0 people viewing, but there may be people viewing. I'm not sure. If you're out there, let me know. I can see texts from or comments from YouTube and Facebook, but I can only reply to the YouTube ones for some reason. So if any of you are out there, let me know. That way we know if this thing is working or not. Shows that there's 2 of you on. And the whole idea about going live is so you guys have the opportunity to ask questions along the way. So really wanted this to be live so we could kind of have some interaction going on there. So before we get started, I thought it'd be kind of fun. Hey, Sally. I thought it'd be kind of fun to take on a couple of other people's photos and just kind of talk about them, and we'll talk about composition and whatnot. And I've been kind of wondering about if this would be a good idea to do these or not. This will be kind of a test phase because a lot of getting a great photo is capturing it great straight out of the camera. If one person takes it and then somebody else edits it, it's 2 completely different styles. And so if I edit it and then you edit it, it may be completely different depending on what you had in mind. And a lot of what I'm going to be doing here is all suggestions. It's not things. I don't want you to just copy what I'm doing. I want you to kind of understand what I'm doing and then implement that into your work, into your workflow. And so, a lot of I'm going to talk a little bit about shooting before we go into the editing. And I've got 4 photos here that were submitted, and I wanted to just kind of stick to a small number because I don't know how long this is going to end up taking. And this photo, I'm not sure if it came in this dark or if it was shot this dark, because when I first dropped it in Lightroom, it was much lighter and then it turned dark. So I don't know if Lightroom did something to it or if it came out this way. I noticed it was shot with a Nikon. It was shot at ISO 500. And I'm assuming this is a zoom lens because it was showing that the focal length is 82 millimeters at an f5 aperture, and the the shutter speed is 320th of a second. So it's possible at shooting this at f5 for it to be this dark and this underexposed. Thankfully, it was shot in RAW, so we'll be able to pull out a lot of detail out of this. Also, I can see why this would have been shot underexposed, because there's a lot of light right here on her face and on her arms. And so if you would have cranked the exposure up on this, those areas would have been overexposed. So I actually applaud you for for exposing for that. That way you didn't lose those details. So this was a good call on your part. And this was submitted by, and I know I'm going to butcher your name. You told me how to pronounce it before, and I forgot. Naja? Maybe? No, that's wrong, but anyway. I'm going to pull up my rule of thirds here. And when I shoot, I have this on my camera. On the back of my camera, I have a rule of thirds pulled up. And so when I shoot, I'm always very conscious about where I'm placing things compositionally. And so I like the way she's sitting here. It does line things up pretty good. It's not right on, and it doesn't have to be. But the way she's angled is good for this composition, because she's facing in that direction, her body's facing that direction, and her head is lined up there. So we've got this line kind of going like this. So that's pretty good right there. But I feel like there's almost needs to be some more space up here. Not as much down here, but up here. But so we may expand this a little bit in Photoshop to get a little bit more room in there. So with that, I would suggest if you can bring that aperture open a little bit more. You probably can't be in a zoom lens. It's probably as low as it'll go. But if you can, bring that aperture down absolutely as low as you can. It'll give you more light and more depth of field. Unless you just don't like that. Maybe that's not what you're going for there. And these submissions came in a couple of different cameras. We have a couple Canons and a couple Nikons. And I do not care what camera you use, whatever brand you use, it really doesn't matter to me. I mean, it could be an iPhone for all I care, or an Android or whatever. If whatever you're using gets you the results you need, then that's great. I feel like the lens is actually more important than the camera, to be honest, because all the camera is doing is taking the photo. The lens it kind of decides the effect you're going to have there. So if you want a super narrow depth of field, you're going to have to get the lens that's capable of doing that. You can't do that in the camera. So anyway, having said that, we're in Lightroom here, and I'm going to go ahead and bring the exposure up here. I'm just going to bring it up, and of course, you can see why now. If she would have shot this like this, this whole area would be overexposed. It would be blown out. So if I just hold Alt, you can see the areas that are blown out there. Not too bad because it's a raw file. But we can come down here and pull the highlights way down to try to correct that. Maybe to about 90. And we're going to bring the shadows up to pull some of the details out of the shadows there. And I'm also going to add a little bit of contrast. And I'm going to pull the blacks down a little bit, just to give it a little bit more depth. Okay, so now we can kind of see what we're doing here. And you can zoom in here and see what kind of quality we're dealing with here. So we've got a little bit of noise in here that we can clean up. A little bit of chromatic aberration in her eyes. So we can go ahead and correct some of that in here. But just looking at this, I do think I'm going to expand the photo a little bit. It's got plenty of space down here. We don't want to add any more negative space down here at the bottom. But we might add some at the top, because looking at the preview up here, I feel like your head is too close to the top up there. Whereas we have down here in the bottom, it's fine. I'm also noticing there's a twig or something right across here. And we may or may not be able to remove that. We'll try. And the reason I say that is because I'm looking at, this goes right across a lot of details that's going to be hard to replace. So like, let me zoom in here a little bit. So in the fabric, you have this, the way it's being pulled in that direction. It's going to be really hard to clean that up without losing that, that texture there. Same thing, you've got the pattern in her shirt here, and it goes across her boot, but I wouldn't be too concerned about down here. It's more of up here. But then there's also a lot of detail in the shadows right here that'll be hard to recover. So we'll just see what we can do with that in Photoshop. But what I can do here in Lightroom is, actually before I do this, I'm going to maybe scroll down a little bit here to the HSL panel. We've got the all this green back here, and I love that you use these opposites here. You got the blue and the green. These are good color opposites here. I'm sorry, the red and the green. Did I say blue? So, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this little eye picker here, and I'm going to select some of the green back here, maybe some lighter green, and I'm going to desaturate that a little bit. Just going to pull that down slightly, maybe to about there. That way the greens aren't overpowering. And then I'm going to scroll down to the details panel, and here's where we're going to work on. We're going to work on this this grain in here. Okay, so we've got this noise. We can use the noise reduction to get rid of that. We can go ahead and crank that up until, okay, There we go. So we've got rid of a lot of that. But I don't want her to look like rubber either. So I'm going to pull it back down until I get enough details back, but have eliminated as much of the noise as possible. So right about there, 22 is really good. And then we can do some extra sharpening here. I'm going to set the amount to 60, the details to 60, and then with that, I don't want it to affect the background or the foreground. I only want it to affect the areas that are in focus. So we can do some masking here. I'm going to zoom out to show you what I'm doing, what I'm talking about here. If you hold Alt and grab that masking slider, it turns white. So everything that's white is being affected right now. If we start pulling that over, you can see as it starts separating, the areas that are black are not being affected. So I'm going to pull that way over to about 80. So now the areas that I want affected are being affected. And you can see the difference when we toggle this on and off. So here's without, here's with. You can see a whole lot of detail that we recovered out of that. So this is very hazy and very noisy and grainy. Let's see, I guess it would be noise. It's noise in the digital age. In the film age, it was grain. So we recovered a lot of detail there. And while I'm zoomed in here, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to lens correction. We've got some purple chromatic aberration here. And this is as far in as I can zoom, I think. Oh, I can zoom in some more here. So we've got this purple chromatic aberration here. We can fix that by grabbing this amount here. You can see it's purple. And we'll just start sliding that over until that purple is gone. We also have a little bit of red, so I might drag this over. There we go. Until we get rid of that. But don't go too far because this will start affecting skin tones, and we don't want that. So you can see the difference there now. It took all that chromatic aberration out of her eyes. So even back, zoomed all the way back here, you could kind of see that chromatic aberration. It's a very subtle thing, but it's one of those things that makes a difference. So let's see here. Anything else I want to do here in Lightroom? I do think I feel like I want to check to make sure this is straightened enough. I feel like it's slightly slanted clockwise. It's hard to tell in an area like this when there's nothing straight. You got trees that are going every different direction. But one thing we can do is the ground she's sitting on would be rather straight in a sense. So if I started right about here and just went along where she's sitting, okay, so it looks pretty straight. I'm actually wrong. I actually went in the other direction. So I'd say it's actually fine. I'm just going to back that up. Go back to where we were there. Just go right there. Press enter. And from here, I'm just going to go ahead and look at, here's where we started right here. And here's where we got in Lightroom. So there's a lot you can do in Lightroom. I'm looking up here at the histogram, and in an image like this, it kind of throws the histogram out of whack because you got areas that are really dark and then areas that are really bright. Oh, that's another thing I want to talk about. Let's see if we can see what time of day this was shot. Let me see if I can pull up some information here. Okay, it was shot September 21st, 2018. It was 5:12 p.m. Now, I don't know where this was taken at. Oh, there's more information here than I thought there was. It's a 70 to 300 millimeter lens. Okay, that makes sense why it was at an aperture of 5. Then that is because that was as low as you could possibly get it at a 70 to 300. Okay. I don't see if it says where it was shot. The GPS was probably turned off. Okay, so at 5 o'clock, at least where I'm at, that should have been dark enough. You shouldn't have had that crazy highlights there. But my suggestion is to shoot towards the end of the day, which you did, of course, depending on where you're at. When the sun is starting to go down, you have soft shadows and highlights. So right now it looks like it's just too bright. You can see these harsh highlights in the trees, and of course on her. And so that just helps quite a bit. So anyway, let's go ahead and bring this over to Photoshop. Just right click, go to edit in Adobe Photoshop. And this will take a minute to go over, if it goes over. If you guys have any questions, just put them up there, and I will try to answer them. Also, can you guys hear me okay? Can everybody hear me? It's showing that my audio is going through, but I never know for sure. Okay, so it went over to Photoshop and didn't tell me. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. And of course, the first thing I do is I always make a copy of my background layer, because it's always good to have, for me anyway, to have that background layer to go back to if I need to pull information from there, available pixels, or just go back and see my progress. I also use hotkeys, and I recommend you use hotkeys as well, because it really speeds up your workflow. If you want to learn your hotkeys and you don't, you can just hover over the tools over here and it will show you what the name of the tool and the hotkey for it. And on my training videos, I have the hotkeys show up down here at the bottom in case I forget to say what they are, but I don't have that ability streaming live, so I'll just try to remember to let you know what buttons I'm pushing as I'm going along. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of the background layer by pressing Option or Command J, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. Oh, great. Thanks, Sally. And, okay, so this might be a little crazy, but just bear with me. But I'm going to expand this image a little bit. There's enough available pixels here that we can expand this image. And so I'm going to press C for the crop tool. And I'm just going to give myself, actually, let me back up here. Let me back up for a minute. I'm going to click this little lock out right there. That way we have room to work over here. Go ahead and press C, and I'm just gonna hold Alt. That way, keep the aspect ratio the same. And I'm just gonna bring this up to where I want it here, which is where I'm putting this line in the third where her face is, or putting her face where the third is, however you want to look at it. And I'm just going to put that line, I'm going to put that crosshair right on her eye right there. Go ahead and press Enter. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and make another duplicate of this layer by pressing Option or Command J. And I'm going to use my Marquee tool by pressing M. And I'm just going to select this area right about here. Now again, bear with me. This is going to be really weird at first. I'm going to press Option or Command T for the Transform tool. I'm just going to pull this, actually, yeah, I'm going to pull this over. I'm going to stretch it over to about there. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Option or Command T, pull that over. And I'm going to go about here, and I'm actually going to grab her head along with it, but don't worry about it. We're going to fix it later. And we're going to drag up to about there. And don't worry about this. Don't worry about it. Promise, don't worry about it. Now I'm actually gonna bring this layer up above that layer there. Okay. And now, actually I'm going to turn that one off for now. I'm going to grab this layer. I'm going to grab my, what tool do I want to use here? I'm going to press J for my patch tool. And I'm going to see if I can just remove her head. Actually, I'm going to press Shift F5 to pull up my fill, which has content aware in there, and see if that'll work. Press OK. Which is basically the same thing as what I just did. I think I'm going to try something else. I'm going to back up here. I'm going to press S for my clone stamp tool. And I'm just going to grab an area over here, maybe about here. I'm just going to paint over. Okay. Now we can turn this layer back on. And it looks like I need to pull this over a little bit more. I'm going to add a layer mask to this one. And make sure I have black selected. Make sure I have my brush tool by pressing B. And I'm just going to paint that to where it will just blend back in. get that tree, make sure I have that big tree in there. And there we go. So now we've expanded this image and blended it in to the point where we have expanded this image out. Now we have a little bit more room to work here. And we can combine all this together, that way we don't have all these layers to mess with here. I'm going to go ahead and press, I'm going to select these two and press Option Command E to just combine those together. And then if you see any repeating patterns, because when we do stuff like that, they're going to have repeating patterns. It's good to kind of clean those up. So like this dot of light here, I see there's two of them. We can just, I'm going to grab my patch tool by pressing J and just make those go away. I see three sticks here all lined up. I want to just kind of randomize things a little bit here. That way it doesn't look like we have duplicates of things going on. This right here, that might be hard to, there we go. Okay, and since we're moving things around now, I'm going to come in here and see if there's any way I can clean up this area with the twig in it. And I guess we could do this, we could try this with Content Aware. Content Aware is starting to get pretty smart, but some of the times it's not very smart at all. So I'm just going to grab the whole thing and see if Content Aware can do something about it. I'm going to press Shift F5 to pull up the Fill tool, which has Content Aware. I'm going to press Enter, see what it does. That's not that bad, actually. We can come in here and clean it up a little bit. The areas that it didn't do that great a job on. There we go. That's not too bad. I don't think anybody would notice that we did that. And then the rest of it isn't so bad. Well, here it is. I'm going to grab my clone stamp tool by pressing S. And guys, I keep glancing over at the comments section over there. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm just going to sample right here. And just paint this out. Of course, this kind of stuff gets kind of tedious, but it can be worth it in the end. I'm just going to keep going with the black here. It's pretty dark under here, so I think the black will blend in pretty well. All right, so there we go. We're able to remove that twig. Let's get that twig out of there. This one little spot's kind of annoying me a little bit. I'm gonna see about just making this go away. There we go. All right. Now with that, I'm gonna do a little bit of extra sharpening in here. And so I'm gonna do that by making another copy of this layer, pressing Option or Command J. I'm going to go up to Filter, Other, High Pass, and make sure, I'm going to set the high pass filter the radius to about 2.5, and press OK. Change the blending mode to Overlay. I'm going to put a layer mask on that and invert it. And I'm going to grab my brush tool, make sure I have white selected. I'm just going to paint this over the areas that are in focus. And this will just help sharpen it, but keep this away from the skin tones because it'll make the skin really grungy. We don't want that. You can do this on with hair and clothing and metallic objects like these rings. but try not to get it on skin. See how it really makes those metallic rings really shine. I might even touch her eyes with this. Just sharpen her eyes with that. You might even make a lips with it. This kind of helps pull out the texture of the lips because it gives it that grungy look, but that kind of helps on the lips. It doesn't work very well on any of the other skin, parts of the skin, but with the lips, since it already has that kind of grungy texture, kind of helps a little bit. All right. Let's see here. What else do I want to do with this image? Another thing about shooting in this harsh light, what part of the problem is you get these harsh shadows. Her nose is casting this harsh shadow over her face, and unfortunately there's not a whole lot we can do about that. Some frequency separation might help with that. I guess there's only one way to find it out. I'm going to go ahead and, if I can remember how to do this. I might not be able to remember how to do that. I haven't done my content aware in a while. I have to practice with my content aware. I created an action that will do my content aware. I'll go ahead and try it. If I can remember how. Okay, let me try this. We go ahead and make a tone stamp layer by pressing Shift, Option, Command, Alt, E, and I'll just make a tone stamp layer of everything underneath. And I'm just going to make another copy of that layer. And oh boy, I'm not going to remember how to do this. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to mess it up. I don't remember how to do it. But basically, what that would do is it would help. It would help to neutralize, kind of blend the shadow out there. Yeah. Okay, so from here, let's see what this looks like with kind of fall edit. I see all these leaves in the ground, so I have to wonder. I know you're not from this country, so that's probably why the time difference and everything. I have no idea what time of year it is or anything like that. If you're here and watching, you can kind of fill me in on some of this maybe. But we can try. I'm gonna try see what happens if I change the leaf color. See if that'll help make this image pop a little bit more. I'm gonna do that by adding a selective color layer, and I'm gonna bring my cyans all the way down on my reds. I'm gonna bring the cyans on yellow all the way down, the cyans on green all the way down. And I'm just going to go ahead and invert that layer mask, and I'm going to paint that on, and grab my brush tool, and paint that on the leaves. And I'll come back and brush it off in a little bit. You could mask it out completely, or you could just paint it off. Whatever you like doing more. I think this could work, but we're getting too close to the color of her shawl now. So we may just keep it the green, just so we keep our color opposites going on. Make sure I didn't do that on her skin, but people let the skin turn orange. Yeah, that didn't quite turn out the way I wanted. It looks more of a brown than I was hoping for there. So I'm just going to turn that off. But I am going to go ahead and create a Hue and Saturation layer. Click Colorize. And we look for kind of a brown color here. And I'm just going to drop the opacity down to about, let's see here, maybe 10% there. That'll just kind of help blend the colors together a little bit, kind of help to desaturate a little bit. I'm also going to pull the exposure up a little more, because this is getting kind of dark. You can look at the histogram here and see how dark it is over there in a little bit. Let's see here. We're going to add a curve curves layer. It doesn't matter which adjustment layer you have here, because this is going to be soft light. Change the blending mode to soft light. And drop the opacity down to about 25. And that will just kind of help with the contrast and depth. We'll drop this down about 20%. And just give it kind of a third dimension there. I'm going to create another curve layer. And with this one, I'm going to add a little bit of vignette here. So I'm going to pull down right here. And I'm going to pull up right here. So just kind of add some kind of a matte look in the shadows. I'm going to grab my brush tool and I'm going to paint this off of where she's at, because this is going to be a vignette. Alright. And I'm going to add a vibrance layer. And just boost the vibrance a little bit here. Boost it by about 40%. I'm going to add another curves layer with this one. I'm going to do a little experimenting here. I'm going to drop the, I'm going to grab my blues here. A little anchor right there. Pull up right here. And let's just add a little bit of blues in the shadows. I don't want a whole lot of that. So I'm going to drop the opacity of that maybe a little bit. And can paint this off with our skin tone. Alright, now I'm going to bring some exposure back to this. I'm going to create another curves layer. I like curves layers. There's a lot you can do with curves. I'm just going to bring the exposure way up. So doing this, I'm going to invert it and brush tool. Make sure I have white selected. I'm just going to paint this onto her. And I'm just going to drop the opacity a little bit. And I'm actually going to drop the opacity this one a little bit as well. And come back in here and paint this off of that part that's really highlighted up here. I wonder if I could actually clean this up a little bit with my patch tool, because the sun is being really highlighted up there. It's making the skin look really grungy. So I'm gonna with my patch tool just gonna clean this up a little bit. I'm just gonna try to blend everything together. This will help quite a bit. Well, the audio is bad. I'm not sure what to do with that. I could turn it off and turn it back on. I might even lose the audio. Has it been bad this whole time, or has it just started? Alright, I'm going to create another layer, copy this layer real quick, pressing Option Command J. And grab these dark areas in their eyes. On both of them. I don't want this to go away completely. I want some of that texture to stay there. So I'm going to drop the opacity of this layer and try to get some of that texture back. right about there, about 53%. Yeah, it's probably from my connection. There's not a lot of that. Our internet here is so bad. Just gonna have to bear with me. Hopefully, when this goes up, it'll be better quality. Okay. So with that, go ahead and look at our before and after here. Whoops. Just before and after. So there we go. That's about all the views and range. I'm trying to see if there's anything else we do. I might do some with this patch of light right here. Actually, a little distracting. I would grab. Let's see here. I'm going to combine these two layers right here. And I'm just going to grab this little patch of light and move it over. And there we go. I keep wanting to do something with her leggings here because they're blue, which I like, but they don't come through as much as I want them to. I'm afraid to mess with it because I kind of like where it's at. I just don't want it to be completely dark, but when I zoom in, it looks pretty good. So anyway, that is how I would edit that photo. So let's go ahead and go back over to Lightroom and move on to the next one. And this image was submitted by Natalia. She's a Canon. Let's go ahead and see what what she used over here. So she used a 50 millimeter. I guess it's a 2.0. That's what she shot at. Okay, no, I see it. 51.8. Nice lens. It's a nice prime lens. Shot at ISO 200. And shot at 400 of a second at aperture 2.0, which was a good call with the 2.0 because you have two subjects here, and so with that narrow depth of field, if you shot wide open, one of them would likely be out of focus, probably be the farther one. And so this is going to be a little challenging for me because and she said that when she submitted it because this is a little different than what I would shoot. I don't shoot indoors very often at all. First thing I noticed in here is I would probably straighten it up a little bit, which this is kind of an action scene going on here, so it's almost appropriate in this context, but it's also a little bit distracting. Also, you may have been moving around because they were obviously moving around, so it's kind of hard to get you on the straight right out, but you did frame it really good here. So, exposure is really good. You have balance it as well as you could right here. It looks like. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to reverse the highlights and the shadows here to help pull out the shadows and the highlights here. I'm going to drop the highlights just a little bit and bring the shadows down because I want to see more of that detail there. So now we can see a lot more detail in the clothing. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the composition here. And see if we can line it up with this line back here. There we go. That looks pretty good. And like the other image, I almost feel like... No, actually not. That's good. What I'm doing now is I want to make sure there's enough, like an equal amount of distance between them here, and their heads are right around the center. And of course, their eyes are right next to the line right there, which is really good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I like where that's at. And I'm just going to zoom in here and see if we have any noise. We have a little bit here. Just zoom way in. See if we can zoom out a little bit more. So it's not that bad. But we can go ahead and scroll on down here to the details. And I'm going to go ahead and do some sharpening here. I'm going to set my amount to 60. So the details to 60 and the masking to 80. So basically the same thing we did in the last image. And you toggle that on and off and see the difference here. So it wasn't a whole lot. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the noise. any better? It's the stream.
So staticky.
There's nothing I can do about it. It's just our reconnection. Okay, well I'm gonna try unplugging my microphone and plugging it back up. I kind of doubt that's what it is. I think it's probably a connection. Let's just go ahead and try. Just bear with me for a minute. Okay, so we have the audio back. Can you check it somehow to see?
Yeah, I gotta go. Here, I'll check it just so I'm good.
All right, just bear with me here, guys. Go ahead and zoom back out here. All right. With this one, I'm going to go ahead and go to my brush tool. And I'm going to set exposure to -1. And I'm going to set the shadows to 30. And saturation to -15. Oh, good.
Oh,
Seems to be working better.
It's fine.
Well, it might have just been my...
So,
Hmm?
it's good.
Oh, good. I updated my system just before doing this, and every time I do that, there's a lot of horrible glitches. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and paint this over the whole image.
Be careful, I live right here.
I don't know what I'm going to do if she starts freaking out.
Thanks, man. Huh? Let me just say.
Alright, I'm just going to hold Alt and paint that off of the center here. Could you? I won't be able to hold her. And I'm just going to back the exposure off a little bit here. Alright, so here's our before and our after here in Lightroom. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and bring this into Photoshop. Right click, go to Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Adobe Photoshop. Of course, I'm going to make a duplicate of the background layer by pressing Option Command J. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and clean up the faces just a little bit. Now, when I do this, I don't want to remove, there's really not a whole lot to do here. I don't want to remove any of the moles or anything like that because that's part of who they are. If there's a lot of acne, I'll remove the acne, scratches, bruises, things like that. I'll remove some of that, but this here I don't want to remove much of this either because this is also part of who they are. But even like with a scar, you don't want to remove a scar unless you're asked to, because there's a story behind that scar. Okay. And then, like I said, there's very little I would want to do to this image. I do want to do some more sharpening. I'm going to do that by making a copy of a duplicate of this layer by pressing Option Command J. Go to Filter, Other, High Pass, and set the radius to 2.5. And this is a lot like when we did the sharpening in Lightroom. Using the masking, it's separating the background and the foreground and only selecting the areas that are in focus. Press OK. And set the blending mode to overlay. And I'm just going to add a layer mask, invert that layer mask by pressing Option Command I. Grab my brush tool and just brush that on. I'm going to brush it onto their clothes. And Photoshop's been really glitchy since I updated it. I hate updating Photoshop because every time I update something, something seems to break. And in this case, it was my brush. You notice every time I start brushing, that happens. And it's just stuck there until I let go and have to do it again. I don't know, it might be my, nope, it happens with the mouse too. And again, when I'm using this, when I'm doing the sharpening, I keep it away from the skin tones. I'll just zoom up here to one of these shirts so you can see, when we toggle that on and off, you can see how much it has sharpened that. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and add a Hue and Saturation layer. And click Colorize. And same thing, I'm just going to grab kind of a neutral, just kind of a brown color there, and just drop the opacity down to about 10 or 12. There we go. And that just helps blend the colors together a little bit and kind of desaturate slightly. We go ahead and add a curves layer or any layer, adjustment layer for soft light. Change the blending mode to soft light and drop the opacity. And I'll use this for adding a little bit of contrast and depth to the photo. And I'll just add another curves layer and add to my vignette with this. I'm just going to pull down slightly here and pull up right here. Not very much with this image being inside. Go ahead and grab my brush tool, have black selected, and paint that off of them. And I look at the preview a lot when I'm doing stuff like that because it's sometimes harder to see when you make these adjustments with the full image, but you can see in the preview areas that, like something I'm noticing in this preview is there's something dark right up here, which I can try to remove. I'm assuming there's a light or something right here and it's causing a shadow here. I'm just going to drop the opacity of this layer a little bit. I'm going to go back to my layer here and grab my patch tool, and I'm just gonna select this area and see what and press Shift F5 and see if Content Aware will clean that up. And it did a fairly good job aside from kind of messing up the texture there. I'll just go ahead and fix that manually. There we go. And clean that little distraction up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and add another Vibrance layer. Boost the Vibrance up a little bit. And I'm half considering desaturating this line in the back because with it having those vibrant colors, I feel like it's distracting a little bit from them. So I'm going to try something here. I'm going to grab a Hue and Saturation layer. I'm going to grab my little color picker here. I'm just going to grab like the green, and I'm going to come down here and grab this plus eyedropper picker. Grab the yellow and the blue. That way we have all of them. And I'm just going to desaturate the whole thing. Not completely. Just about completely, but not completely. Maybe by -75%. I'm going to go ahead and invert that by pressing Option or Command I. Grab my brush tool, pressing B, and make sure you have your white selected. And we can just paint that right over. And then if we wanted to, we could even boost the colors, or saturate the colors around them a little bit more. We can even drop this layer, the opacity a little bit if we feel like that was too much saturation or desaturation. Let's pull that back a little bit. I'm going to bring this vibrance up a little bit more. That will help their colors to come out a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and add another curves layer and add some blues in this one, like I did in the last one, to see See if that'll work in here. I'll actually add a little bit more yellow than anything, but because the opposite is yellow. We'll go ahead and paint this off of them. I'm going to back that up off just a little bit. I'm going to make a clone stamp layer by pressing Shift, Option, Command, Alt, E. And I'm going to go up to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. I'm going to check something real quick. I'm going to check my white balance on here. See if this needs to maybe be cooled down a little bit. There we go. I feel like it's a little warm. I could have done this easily in Lightroom. I didn't think of it until just now. Go ahead and click OK. So I just cooled the image down a little bit. The white balance is a hair off. It was kind of on the warm side there. So there we go. I'm going to check my before. Here's the before here. Here's the after this. So there's not a whole lot we've done here. In fact, there's something else I want to do. I'm going to add another curves layer and add some exposure to their faces, really. Go ahead and invert that and paint that around them. There we go. All right. And that is how I would edit that image. Go ahead and head back over to Lightroom. And Ruth, here's your image. Are you still with us? By the way, I'm looking at these pretty much for the first time here in Lightroom. I haven't had a chance to go over any of these before this session. I got here and I was hoping to kind of look over them a little bit before I started, but that's when I realized I was having all these issues with the stream. I'm going to go ahead and head over here to look at the, see what you used. So you're using an 85mm lens. You shot at, let's see, an 85 1.8. Awesome lens. Awesome, still here. Used your Nikon. You had your ISO set to 200, and you shot at 800th of a second at 2.0. And again, good job for going up to the 2.0. Since you have multiple people here, having a super narrow depth of field, it's going to be really hard to keep everybody in that focus plane at a really narrow depth of field. So looking at this image, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. Something looks weird. There we go. Okay. This over here, the where the light's hitting these trees, my focus keeps wanting to go there. So that's something to note. We'll want to do something about that, as well as the car back there. Obviously, it will be pretty easy to get rid of. But I'm going to, oh, I know why it looks weird. I'm still going to go to Development tab over here. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab my composition here, and we'll just go ahead and work on this. I feel like they're a little bit too far away, so I'm going to hold Shift so I can keep the aspect ratio, and just bring this down a little bit. This will take care of a lot of that light over there. And we don't want too much negative space down here on the bottom. I'm just going to try to center them as best I can. Try to have the two boys on each third line here. I'm going to try to line that line up with both their eyes and get a good balance between the space down here and the space above her head. Maybe widen that a little bit. All right, so right about there. Hit enter. Okay, and exposure's really good, considering the. It looks like you probably shot this in the middle of the day, kind of like the first one we started. Here, I'm going to see what time that was shot. See if it says 5:21, almost exactly the same time as the other one. No, wait a minute. Even the date looks the same. Maybe these dates and times are wrong. Maybe I don't need to rely on that. It looks like you were shooting not quite in the middle of the day, but still pretty early enough where you still had some harsh highlights and shadows. Again, I would recommend shooting just before the sun goes down, where you've got really nice soft shadows and highlights. These are a little bit softer than the first image we had. But, okay, so by cropping it, we were able to get rid of that, all that light on the bush over there that was really distracting me. We just have that just little spot here. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the exposure here. I'm going to pull the exposure up just a little touch. It was around 5. That's really ironic. Okay. Huh. Interesting. I'm going to bring contrast up just a little bit. And I'm going to pull these highlights way down to about 90. It's interesting that this must have been a very sunny day. I'm going to pull the shadows up. And there's a slight haze here. Trying to understand why there's this haze in here. You are shooting with a Nikon. Let me see what kind of camera you're using here. Using a Nikon D5500. Okay. That's a crop sensor camera, isn't it? We can use the dehaze slider here to get rid of that haze. And just move that up a little bit. And there we go. Haze is gone. But yeah, I'm not quite sure why that haze is in there. I'm hoping it's not your lens. It may just be that it caught the light just right. Yeah, there's so many different things that it could be. I remember when I was shooting with my crop sensor camera, I had the same issue. I'd get a haze in there all the time, and I just thought it was my lens or something, but no, I think it was just that camera. Okay, go ahead and move down here to Details panel, and I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. We can see the noise here. I'm just going to get rid of some of that noise, but we're also going to do some sharpening here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do the same thing I did to the others. This seems to work universal for me for the kind of shooting here. If you have a nice narrow depth of field, set the amount to 60, detail to 60, and then masking to 80. And then we can reduce the noise to about 20. That's normal. Does it do that on different lenses too, Ruth? Okay, so we have a much sharper image now. Go ahead and zoom out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush tool, and with the same settings we had on the other one, I'm going to brush this on. And hold Alt and brush it off of them. So just add some vignetting there. I'm just going to bring the exposure back up a little bit. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring this into Photoshop. Right click, go to Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Yeah, I'm not sure. Not so much with the 35. Could just be that it caught the light a little bit right there. I know shooting with my 85 1.4 with my crop sensor camera, I got that a lot. And come to think of it, I didn't have it as much in my 50mm either, so it might just be may just be a thing with the 85s, or maybe the more telephoto of a lens that you're using. Maybe with the crop sensor cameras seem to have that haze in it. It's interesting. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of the background layer by pressing Option or Command J, and I'm going to get rid of that vehicle back there. Just going to grab, press J and grab my patch tool, and I'm going to use Shift F5 to pull up my fill tool here. Have Content Aware selected. Click OK to see if that'll get rid of it. It might look weird with the road right there. Yeah, and it grabs your shoulder. I'm just going to slide this over. And I'm just going to clean up this area here. Sometimes content aware does really great, other times not so much. Grab my clone stamp tool and see if I can't get that edge back on the road a little bit. Kind of. All right. Clean that up, and I'm also going to get rid of these remaining branches from that tree. Okay. So these two right here, I'm gonna, they've got some dark shadows under their eyes. Him, not so much. I'm gonna create another copy of this layer by pressing Option or Command J. I'm just gonna come down here and, whoops. Okay. I'm not sure what it copied over here. That's not my layer. Go ahead and make a copy of that layer. Not sure why I did that. I'll try this again. And I don't ever recommend just removing these dark lines completely because it always looks weird. It kind of look like an alien. But if you remove it remove it and then bring it back a little bit, that way that some of the texture is still there. Oh, and look at this. I copied part of his head over there. I need to make sure to make that go away. All right. So obviously that's very noticeable. So if we drop the opacity on that, we'll get some of that texture back. That way it kind of cleans it up a little bit, but doesn't make it go away completely. So you see the difference there. And I'm just going to go ahead and combine those two layers. And I'm going to make this chunk of his head that I copied go away. And because this was a warm image, it made her teeth look really yellow. It's just kind of a weird phenomena that happens. We can fix that by grabbing a selective color layer and go to our yellows. Just pull the yellows all the way down. No, wait, is that right? Yeah. Oops. Okay, right there. And I'm just going to invert that layer mask and paint white over it. If I can get my brush to match the pixel size here. My brush is giving me so many issues. Just paint that over and remove that yellow, so now we have nicer looking teeth. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add a sharpening layer. We're going to go ahead and make a copy of this layer and go up to Filter, Other, High Pass. I'm just going to set the radius to 2.5 and set the blending mode to overlay. And go ahead and put a layer mask on that and invert it. Yeah, the crop sensor cameras are going to have really soft images. That's just part of it. I just thought it was me with my crop sensor for a long time. It just bugged me because I thought I was just I didn't understand what I was doing. But it's hard to get a really nice, crisp, clear image with a crop sensor camera. At least with my experience. course, I have a pretty cheap one. Still use that camera from time to time. Actually, I have two of them. I bought a Canon T1i just for the heck of it, just to play around with it to see if I could still produce decent photos with an old crop sensor camera. All right, so there we go. We got sharpen that image, and let's see here. Go ahead and add my hue and saturation layer, colorize, and try to get some nice browns over here. Drop the opacity way down. That's kind of cool right there. I don't want to go that far, but maybe keep this one about 16%. Kind of like the warmth that gave it. I've heard good things about the D750. That's a full frame, isn't it? I know absolutely nothing about Nikons. I just don't. I've never used one. I've never even used one. I have nothing against them whatsoever. I've seen fantastic photos of Nikons. Like I said at the beginning, I don't care what camera you use as long as it gets the job done. I love my Sonys, but if there's something better that comes out, I mean, who knows? I used a Pentax camera once. It was awesome. How did I turn it brown? Okay, I created a hue and saturation layer, and I clicked colorize, and then I just changed the hues until I got a nice brown. Here, I'll just repeat the process. I'm going to delete that. Add a hue and saturation layer. Click colorize. So now you get this kind of overall color. I grabbed the hues here and I just slid it over until I got kind of a nice brown here. And then just drop the opacity of that layer until you get the color back in. And then you just, basically what this does is it helps kind of blend the colors together and kind of desaturates the image a little bit. The reason I do it is it helps with the color profile that I'm going with here. So you can toggle that on and off and see it kind of made the blues kind of went away. Those blues were like in the road were kind of harsh, and it just kind of blended all those colors together. It's just a kind of a thing I do. Yeah, you're gonna love the full frames. It was huge when I switched to my full frame, and I thought it was gonna be hard to get used to at first because of the difference with the sensor size, but it really wasn't. Got used to it pretty quick. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and create a soft light layer. Just add a curves layer and change the blending mode to soft light and drop the opacity down. I'm going to leave this one at about 30%. That just really separated the background of the fore and kind of add a lot of contrast and gave it more of a three-dimensional look there. And let's see here. I might. No, I don't want to do that. I was going to do some dodging and burning possibly. I don't dodge and burn very often. I just thought it might help them stand out a little bit. You know, I might try it. Go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and add a clone stamp layer, or I'm just going to come back to my main layer down here. You can name that main layer if you want. I don't ever name anything. I'll just make a copy of that layer and go up to Filter, Other, High Pass, and I'm just going to drop this radius all the way down as far as it'll go. Click OK. Change the blending mode to Overlay. And now it's just a regular layer now. Nothing's changed. But we can grab our brush tool. And I'm going to set the opacity to about 10%. And now you can use this as a dodge and burn layer. And there's so many different ways you could dodge and burn. This is just one that I use. You use white to dodge, black to burn. So if I just painted white on here, you can see it just brightens things up. Or if I paint black, it just darkens things up. That's all it does. So I wanted to kind of brighten their faces a little bit. And some parts of their clothing, just to try to help them stand out a little bit more. We've got that light on her hair there. I think I'll zoom up here. It looks like we might have a little chromatic aberration. Yep, going on here. gotta get rid of that chromatic aberration. I didn't notice that. That's easy to remove in Lightroom, but we can also do it in Adobe Camera Raw really easily. Okay, I'm gonna go down, maybe down her shirt with this. Just has some light on her leg here and her boots. And I'm just going to grab my burn. Just going to burn the dark parts here. I didn't realize you can paint this in layers. Better be careful with that. Okay. And you can just toggle that on and off and see what that did. That just kind of helped it stand out a little bit more. And if it's too much, you can drop the opacity a little bit. I'm going to drop it down about 10%. Okay, before I forget, I'm going to go ahead and fix that chromatic aberration. I'm going to do that just right here in the main layer. Go ahead and go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and we'll just take this and go over to Lens Correction. I'm going to zoom up. I saw it here in her hand a lot, in their hands. I see a lot of pink there. So I'm just going to grab this slider and just go around the pink area here and just move this slider over to about 4 or 5. That just completely made it go away. See if there's any more. I saw it on his shirt. Oh, it's gone. Non-existent. Got rid of the chromatic aberration. Okay, go ahead and click OK. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add another curves layer. And this is going to be going to help with the vignette. So I'm going to pull down here, pull up right here. I'm just going to grab my brush tool. I'll make sure I bring my opacity back up. And just paint that off of them. And I'm going to drop the opacity of that to about 85. Maybe a little bit more, maybe about 75. Okay, I'm going to add a Vibrance layer to pull some more color out. So this is to help boost their colors. Add that to about 50%. Yeah, Ruth, you can do the same thing a million different ways in Photoshop. Just like the dodging and burning. I've seen that done so many different ways. You could use the dodging and burning that Photoshop has over here, or you could use a what if function to do your dodging and burning. You could just use a curves layer. I've seen it done so many different ways. Just however you want to do it. Okay, go ahead and add another curves layer. See about maybe adding some blues in my shadows. Add a little anchor there. And I don't want very much of this one. In fact, I'm going to try something a little bit different here. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to go ahead and add a solid color layer and see if I can add some more color in my tones, more color tones. I'm just going to grab a nice dark kind of blue, really dark blue. Click OK. Change the blending mode to soft light. Just drop the opacity down to about 20. Actually, I'm going to mess around with the colors here. See which ones I like more. Purple's kind of fun. I think I'll go with that dark purple. I'm going to drop the opacity a little bit more, about 10%. It's a very subtle thing. It's just in the tones in the background there. And I'm going to go ahead and create one more curves layer, and I'm going to boost the saturation with this one. Just bring that curves up invert it, grab my brush tool, and paint this right over them. All right. Whoops. Okay, I feel like my vignette's a little too much. I'm going to drop that opacity a little bit more. All right. And I believe that's about where I would go with this edit. So you can see our before, our Photoshop before here, and after. So yeah, that's how I would edit that image. Ruth, you have any more questions before I move on? I'll wait for your answer while I go ahead and come on over here. We'll look at the camera on this one. All right. Sally Jacobs, you were on earlier. Are you still here? I should have done yours first. I think I did these backwards from the way they were submitted. Let's go ahead and see what you used. A Canon 80D 51.8. That's 251.8. You shot at aperture 2.8 with shutter speed of 1/80th of a second, which I would recommend shooting that a little bit faster. Yeah, you're very welcome, Ruth. I'm going to try to just leave this on so you can come back and watch it whenever you're on. I'm just going to leave it on YouTube and Facebook so you can come back and watch it whenever you want. Oh, good, Sally, you're still here. Okay, okay, ISO is 100. Okay, you shot this at about 3 o'clock. This looks like it was overcast, and overcast is the best time to shoot, as far as I'm concerned, because you got nice diffused lights and shadows. So I love it. So I would recommend shooting a little bit faster, at least double what your focal length is. Of course, you're shooting crop sensor, so that might not apply as much. But I would still recommend at least shooting at 1/100th of a second if you're using a 50mm lens. This is kind of a rule that I follow, that I made for myself. Aside from that, it looks like it's nice and sharp. So it worked, obviously. So we'll go ahead and go over to the Develop tab. And with this one, I might do a little bit of like what we did with the first one. Possibly. Because there's little room between the top of his head and the top of the photo. And of course, I'm going to make this white deal go away here. I'm assuming it's the edge of a building or something. We'll go look at our composition here real quick. I would give it a little bit of wiggle room, Sally, when you're shooting. That way it gives you a little bit more freedom in the editing process. What I mean by that is you're cropped in really tight. And unless this is exactly how you wanted it, it makes it really difficult to make any changes in post. So if you just step back just a little bit, that way you have a little bit of room for changing the composition if you need to. If you were going to go for a center crop, I would have shot at a vertical, so more like this, which I think I'm going to actually change this to this, because shooting this horizontal and then putting him in the center would be okay. There's no rule, and there are, but who cares, as far as I'm concerned. If you like it, that's great. But what I would do is I would typically, with a horizontal image, I would put him on a third, probably over here. Or, well, actually, in this case, I'd put him over here because there's a building or something right here. But in this case, since we don't have a whole lot of room here, I would actually crop it and turn it into a vertical crop right here. And I don't know if I have, let's see here, what do we have? What are our options here? I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay, I like that 5x7 there. And he looks good and straight. I don't think I need to change the balance there. The level looks pretty good there. So I'm just going to set that about there. And already I like that. When you're if I'm going to do a center crop, I usually do a vertical. Okay, exposure is great. Yeah, I mean, there's very little we gotta do there. Exposure is great here. Might have a little bit of contrast. Might pull the highlights down a little bit. His skin's a little bright. So I'm gonna pull the highlights down to about 60. Pull the shadows out just a little bit so you can see a little bit more detail in his jacket area here. And pull the blacks down, add some depth. And I'm gonna go ahead and do some sharpening. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm looking at the colors here, his outfit. We've got pink, green, and blue, which I might change one of these. Actually, I might change a couple of them to go for, so we can go for a kind of a color opposites kind of thing, or complementary colors. But having the 3 different colors in there, that was probably obviously intentional. So that's completely up to you. I'm liking his little camouflage vest here, so might pick some colors that are close to that, which the green and the blue are close. The pink I might change to something else, but we'll think about that when we get to Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here, and this is a nice clean image. Got a little bit of noise, but not very much. I'm going to go ahead and change, I'm going to go do some sharpening here, same as I've done in the other images. Amount to 60, details to 60, and masking to 80. And right away you can see there's a huge difference there. I've got a nice crisp sharpen there. And there's really not hardly any noise in here whatsoever. I might just bring it up to like maybe 10. Casey, critique from my picks or from other people's picks? You want me to do the critiquing or somebody else? You should critique. Oh, you want me to critique picks from your views at fast? Oh, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing here, Casey. That's kind of the idea. I'm just very careful about that because I don't want to hurt or offend anybody whatsoever. There is no bad photos because it's all subjective. If you like it, then that's great. I just want to put my 2 cents worth in as to what I would do, and nobody has to take my advice. It's just that's what I would do, and you can take it or leave it. So yeah, that's kind of what this is. Thanks for the advice there, Casey. I might do that. This episode is kind of a test phase, so we'll see if we keep doing this or not. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to my brush over here. And with the same information we typed in earlier, I'm just going to brush this over and paint it off of him. It's good to know that you guys can see me on YouTube as well. It's the first comment I got from YouTube, so I wasn't sure. My stats still say there's nobody watching, so I have no idea. Go to my other stats. I have multiple stats over here. Both of my stats say nobody's watching. That's funny. Can't trust any of those. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring this image over to Photoshop. And hey, Mysterious Night Life 1, how are you? I might have to tell that to bring that image back over. Sometimes it decides not to do it. Let's try that again. Here we go. Okay, of course we're going to make a copy of our background layer by pressing Option or Command J. And the very first thing I'm going to do here, actually, very first thing I'm going to do is sharpen. I'm going to do some extra sharpening here. I always like double sharpening. Can't get enough sharpening. So we go ahead and make another copy. Hey, thanks. I'm going to do another copy of this layer and go up to Filter, Other, High Pass. I'm going to change the radius to 2.5. Click OK. Change the blending mode to Overlay. Sorry if I'm rushing through this. It's getting late, but I want to try not to rush it too much. But at the same time, this video will be it'll be live. It'll be up, so you guys can go back and rewatch it. So don't worry too much about it. I'm gonna go ahead and add a layer mask to that and invert the layer mask. Grab my brush and just paint this on any of the areas I want to sharpen, which would be his hat, his clothes, hair, his rock. It's always great to give kids something to hold, something to do. Because if you just sit a kid out there with nothing, they get they get very bored very quick. And one way to get rid of the boredom is to start making faces or just not cooperating. Go ahead and add this to the eyes. And come back down to this layer here, and I should have, you know what, I'm gonna have to I don't know what I was thinking. I'm going to go ahead and combine these together, because anything I do to this main layer now will be like a ghost, because like if I try to remove something, a remnant of it will be left behind with this high pass filter layer. So I'm just going to combine these together by selecting both of them and pressing Option or Command E. I'm going to come in here and remove this little speck here with my patch tool by pressing J. And this little thread here is kind of bugging me too. Alright, I'm going to do some work to his eyes here. His eyes are nice and clear. Okay, so let me do a little bit more sharpening here. I'm going to grab the sharpening tool here. And just going to go over his eye a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and add a curves layer. Bring the exposure up. Go ahead and invert that layer mask. Grab my brush tool and just paint that into his eye here. There we go. So now we've got really great detail in those eyes. And of course, if that's too much, you can back it off. We don't want his eyes to be glowing, but I don't think it's too bad. Maybe a little bit. Let's back it up just a little bit. Okay. Now, I was kind of thinking with the about the colors here. I have a little color tool here that Adobe has provided, and you can, with the latest version, you can come up here to Windows Extensions, and they've got this Adobe color themes that I noticed was in here, which is really nice. And you can see I've got it set on opposites here, so you can see the opposite of blue is yellow. Now, I don't know about turning his shirt yellow, but you can just see the colors here, just kind of get an idea, just kind of get inspired or whatever. But it's just kind of a fun tool to pick out and play around with when you're thinking about colors here. And like I said, I don't know if his shirt will look right changing it to yellow, but it's worth a try. Let's see what happens here. Well, I'm going to grab a Hue and Saturation layer. I haven't done this in a while. I'll give it a try. I'm going to grab my little eyedropper tool here and just click his pink shirt. And I'm going to grab my plus tool. I'm just going to click and drag around on his pink shirt here. This will give us a good range of that color there. And now you can just change this hue and see what kind of colors we have here to play around with. So here's the yellow right here. If we're going to change it yellow here, and don't worry about the rest of the image. It looks crazy right now. Just look at the shirt, because we're just going to paint this on later. So right there, and you can boost the saturation maybe to get it a little bit more yellow. And we can go ahead and invert that layer mask and grab my brush here and just paint it on just to the shirt. And if that ends up really weird, we can obviously change it back or change it to something different. Because I'm not too crazy about the yellow right now, but with it being the opposite of blue, kind of want to give it a try. Of course, I'm being kind of sloppy at this because I'm just in a little bit of a hurry. Is all. I don't want to get too precise right now. And then I'm also going to do, I'm going to try to change his hat to the same color as his jeans. So I'm going to go ahead and create another Hue and Saturation layer. And just do the same thing. Grab the color of his hat. Alright. Whoops. I think I just messed up there. I'm going to have to reset that. Okay. And see if I can get a nice blue. Probably right about there. I'll try to get it to look as much like his jeans as I can. Alright, go ahead and change the blending mode. Sorry, invert that layer mask. Sorry, I haven't got much sleep the last couple of nights. My brain doesn't work properly when it doesn't get any sleep. Let's go ahead and paint that on. Alright, so that's color opposites. Now I feel like obviously this shirt is kind of being kind of crazy. I'm thinking if we had more of a, if it was a darker green, that'd be kind of cool. So it would match more like his vest there. Let's see, we'll go back to the greens here. And that's not quite what I had. Doesn't look like it's going to go back to its original. There we go. It's showing reds for some reason. Oh, that's because we selected the pinks. Okay. So let's see if we can change this to more of a darker color. Here we go. Try to match that up with the green on his jacket there, maybe. So almost more of a desaturated green. I think that looks a little bit better. And even with this hat, maybe if we can desaturate that just a touch, or darken a little bit. Actually, bring it back up a little bit. I'm looking at the preview window up here. All right. Be right about there. And this little twig right here is kind of bugging me. We can come down here and remove this twig. Casey, probably not this time around. I have, if I'm going to keep doing this, I have, I'm going to be accepting submissions, and I got to find a better way of doing it because this time around didn't work out very well. But if I keep doing this, yeah, I put the word out, and you guys can put submissions in there. That way it doesn't get, you know, crazy overwhelming, and I'm just kind of running out of time for this evening. It's going to be a long day for me tomorrow. But yeah, if you're on my mailing list or you follow me on Facebook, I'll put the word out and let you know when or if I'm going to do another one of these. and you can drop some of your photos in there, or you may have just pick one or two. Right now I'm just accepting one from each person. Okay, so from here I'm going to go ahead and add my Hue and Saturation layer. Click Colorize and get some nice browns in there. Drop the opacity. Yeah, kind of like it like that. About 30%, maybe a little less. Let's go 20%. There we go. I really like how that one turned out. Wow, Guatemala. Fernando, what time is it over there? Thanks for the greetings. That's amazing. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and create a, let's see, a curves layer. Change the blending mode to soft light. And drop the opacity to about 26. Let's add some depth there. 940p, and well, it's the same as here. I'm not sure where that's at. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to create another curves layer. This will be my vignette. So I'm going to pull down right about here and pull up right about here. And just paint that off of him. I'm going to leave a lot of it down this area by his feet, kind of like that. And go ahead and add, actually I'm going to just drop the opacity of that a little bit. Add a Vibrance layer. Boost the Vibrance by about 40. And the reason I do this, so I desaturated it earlier, and now I'm bringing color back in with Vibrance. It's because I have more of the color palette that I'm going for here. So if you guys are wondering about that, because like when I do my let's see, where is it here? My Hue and Saturation layer, where I kind of desaturate the image and then I add color back into it later. It's because I've got more of the color profile I'm going for. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and add another curves layer and see about adding some blues in here. I'm going to put a little anchor right there. And just pull up right here. Just add a little bit of blue in there. And I'm going to paint this off of his face and his skin, because it kind of makes their skin tones a little yellow when you do that. And let's see, I may go ahead and try adding that solid color layer like I did in the last one. Just add some more color in the tones. Change the blending mode to soft light and just drop the opacity way down to about 18, maybe a little bit more, maybe about 12. Alright, I'm going to add another curves layer and add some, bring some exposure back up here. Maybe right about there, invert the layer mask, and just paint that back on. And there we go. Sally, do you have any questions before I wrap this up? Because this is about where I'd go with this if I were to edit this photo. So here's our before, our Photoshop before and after. And again, you may have picked those colors out that may have been exactly what you meant, and so don't take this as I'm telling you that this is the way it needs to be. This is just kind of how I would have edited it. This may have totally been what you were going for there, and in that case, stick with it. Don't just because I changed the colors doesn't mean you have to. This is just how I would edit it. More or less, just what I'm trying to show here is with my editing process, the different things that I'm doing is helping you to understand how they work, and then you can take that and use it however you like. I'm not in any way telling you what to do. I'm just more or less telling you how to do it, if that makes sense. So anyway, let's see here. So we've got the got everybody's photos up here. I didn't hear back from Natalie or Naja. I don't know if they're on tonight. But guys, thank you so much for submitting photos. This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys got anything out of this. It'd be great to hear from you guys later on to let me know if this was worth it, if this was worth staying up for, how long has it been? An hour? When did we start? 8 o'clock? Well, it's been almost 2 hours. 8 hour and 40 minutes. So yeah, 4 or 5 images will probably be the max then if I'm going to keep doing this. And I'll let you guys know if I continue to do this or not. It's just January, it's slow for me. The sessions have finally slowed down, so I decided to go ahead and try to do one of these. But this is the time of year where I need to work on my online stuff as well. So I'm just always busy. But I kind of enjoy doing this, and might consider continuing to do it. I'd love to get to the point where I'm doing something like this weekly and get my YouTube channel going again. So anyway, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any suggestions, recommendations, please let me know. Ruth, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Like I said, again, I'll let you guys know if I do another one. If you guys aren't on my mailing list, might consider getting my mailing list. I try not to put too many emails out. On my mailing list, I announce when I have a new editing video available, or when I have a new blog post, or if I'm doing something like this. So, and the way you can sign up for the mailing list, you can just go to my website, and off to the side where it'll show you my free course. You can sign up for that, and it'll put you on the mailing list. And yeah, using how many ways to accomplish the same end results. I know, Ruth, it's funny how that that's how, I think that's the thing that confuses people the most with Photoshop, is there's so many options and so many ways of doing the same thing. It can get confusing. And the longer with one of these images, you can look at this image and continue editing it for hours and hours, and it'll never be done. Because even right here, while I'm talking and looking at this image, I can see several other things that I would do, like part of his knee here is a little scruffy for some reason, is catching my attention, so you could grab like that, and of course that didn't help very much. My content aware isn't going to do a very good job at it. Maybe a little bit. And then this white rock right here is kind of grabbing my attention. So when to call an image done is hard to say. It kind of helps to kind of plan it out a little bit. I like to kind of look at an image and think it through a little bit. And if you have time, what I would recommend is to edit a photo and then walk away from it and then come back with fresh eyes, and you will see 1,000 new things to work on. It never fails. So anyway, Fernanda, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you're able to see the whole thing. If you guys came in late or you'd like to see it again, I'm going to leave this on my Facebook page and YouTube channel so you guys can come back and watch it. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and let you guys get the rest of your evening, or go ahead and go to bed. That's what I'm going to do. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.